She looks just like her mom. So cute. Ken was overreacting a bit in front of his cousin's baby, but he adored the little one. "Ah, so tiny and squishy, just like an angel," he said, poking the baby's cheeks and slipping his finger into the tiny hand. He even cuddled and nuzzled the baby's cheek. His actions were so loving, like those of a doting parent, that everyone present was taken aback. But I, observing Ken intently amidst this heartwarming scene, knew exactly why he was so interested in someone else's child. "Really looks just like you are. How does it feel to be a dad?" I remarked, making my father-in-law's eyes go wide. "Hey, what are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? That's the problem with failed nurses like you," Ken retorted, unflustered, and insulted me as usual. But I was no longer going to be swayed by Ken's words. It was time for me to get back at him for all the mockery he had thrown my way. "My name is Sarah Johnson. I'm a 32-year-old nurse, and I married Ken, a doctor in the town where I work, after dating him for 6 months. A year ago, Ken, 2 years older than me, worked as a doctor in the clinic where I work. The clinic was founded by Ken's father, and his brother Harry also works there. It seems like my father-in-law plans to let Ken take over the hospital and always discusses important management plans with him. My relationship with Ken started on the recommendation of my father-in-law, who was then my boss. He asked me to seriously consider Ken after I had expressed a desire to get married during a drinking session. Ken, being 31 at the time, probably seemed like a suitable partner to support the hospital in the future from his father's perspective. After some hesitation, I suggested to my father-in-law that I would consider dating Ken, starting with a dinner. Regardless of any romantic interest, he happily set up the dinner, and I ended up dining alone with Ken. I had only had minimal interaction with Ken through work and had always avoided non-work-related conversations with him, assuming doctors were always preoccupied with complex matters. However, Ken turned out to be more conversational than I thought. We found common ground in our interest in recent comics and novels, and Ken seemed delighted throughout our conversation. Later, Ken asked me out on a date, and we went to see a movie on a day the hospital was closed. Although not a man of many words, Ken seemed to think we clicked, and he confessed his feelings at the end of the day, leading to our swift start of a relationship. It wasn't a fiery romance. I thought being with Ken would ensure a secure future, and being in the same industry, we could understand each other's professional struggles, making us good partners. 6 months into our relationship, Ken and I tied the knot. We invited relatives, friends, and colleagues from the hospital to our grand wedding ceremony. At my wedding, the friends I invited as guests were all envious, saying how lucky I was to marry a doctor from a prestigious family. I didn't marry Ken just because he was the son of a clinic owner, but the idea of a secure future was something my parents and I were all happy about. Our marriage started off smoothly. I think Ken didn't like doing household chores much, so I took care of them myself. As a doctor, Ken often came home late because of extended consultations, and since I could get off work on time, I was eager to do my part for my busy husband. I realized after getting married that I actually enjoyed housework. It used to be a hassle to clean the house or cook for just myself, but doing it for Ken gave me energy. However, Ken never once said my cooking was delicious. I knew he wasn't one to praise others easily, but I wished he would appreciate my efforts a little. Still, I worked hard to maintain a peaceful newlywed life and took care of everything at home. About 3 months into our marriage, I got a call. "Hello, Sarah." "Hi, Julie. What's up?" It was from my cousin, Julie. She's 4 years younger than me, and we used to live nearby when we were kids, so she's always been clingy like a real sister. We hadn't interacted much as adults, but we reunited at my wedding. Julie is married to a guy named Joseph, who is a brilliant lawyer. When I first met him, I thought he was exactly the kind of man Julie would choose. Julie is very beautiful and stood out even among the guests at my wedding. My friends kept whispering, "Who's that beauty?" When I told them she was my cousin, they were all surprised. I felt a bit miffed, knowing they were shocked because I'm plain and average looking, but I reminded myself that I was the star of the show and let it go. But what could Julie want? I was curious and asked. "Actually, I'm looking for a hospital. Just a cold, but it's been dragging on and bothering me. You know the clinic where Ken, you work? Can I come in for a checkup?" "A checkup? That's totally fine." I felt a bit let down. It was just that. "Thanks. I'll drop by tomorrow then." She sounded too energetic for someone with a cold, and I wondered if she really had one or if something else was up. But at that time, I had no idea that this phone call would threaten our everyday life as a couple. True to her word, Julie came to the clinic the next day. She was dressed in a surprisingly short skirt for someone in her 30s and a shoulder-bearing knit top. I wondered if it was okay for someone with a cold to be exposed to so much. It was a busy Monday morning, and she had to wait about an hour, but she didn't seem to mind just playing with her phone. Finally, it was Julie's turn, and by then, it was almost lunchtime. The clinic was about to break for lunch, so I waited at the reception for the last appointment of the morning to finish. But no matter how long I waited, Julie didn't come out of the examination room. Wondering if something was wrong, I was about to ask Ken, a doctor, when Julie finally emerged. "How did it go?" I asked. "Just a seasonal cold. Glad it's nothing serious and that I just need cold medicine," she replied, paying for the visit. But I was puzzled. A 30-minute consultation for a simple cold. Usually, it takes like 5 minutes. Moreover, Julie's face was unusually red when she came out, making me suspect she was hiding a serious illness. "Are you really okay? Your face is red," I asked. "Oh, is it? The heating was a bit too high in there." Julie answered coolly and left, saying, "See you again, Sarah." That night, I brought up my concerns to Ken. Julie, my cousin, came in today. Her consultation seemed unusually long. Was there something wrong? Ken raised his eyebrows slightly. Nothing unusual, just a lot of questions about foods and strategies to combat a cold. That's why it took longer. "Oh, I see," I said. He returned to his room, and I still wondered if 30 minutes was too long. But no matter how many questions I asked him, Ken did not like to talk about work at home, so I didn't press further. My unease grew when Julie kept visiting the clinic, insisting that she was still recovering from a cold. She continued to come to the hospital and was willing to wait for a long time on each visit. Her consultation times were unusually long, sometimes lasting up to 40 minutes. We even scheduled her appointments right before lunch breaks, and she agreed to this, not complaining when patients who arrived later were seen first. After about 5 visits, I started to worry. Julie's cold should have gotten better by now. If it wasn't healing, I thought about referring her to a larger hospital. "Are you sure you're okay? If it's serious, I can ask the doctor to refer you to a bigger hospital," I suggested. Julie's face went pale at that. "No need for referrals. I'm perfectly happy with the treatment here. Don't make a big deal out of it just because we're cousins," she snapped back. I was taken aback, speechless at her sudden outburst. She left briskly, saying, "See you next time." I was stunned and couldn't stop thinking about Julie all day. She must be hiding something, keeping a secret from me. That's why she got so upset when I tried to delve a little into her private matters. I started to suspect Julie even more, and it was around this time that Ken's behavior began to change drastically. I used to handle all the household chores, but Ken started complaining about my housework. "Hey, Sarah, aren't my dishes still dirty?" "Oh, really? Sorry, I'll rewash them right away," I replied. "Damn you for doing random housework." He'd yell at me unnecessarily over a little bit of leftover grime on the clean dishes. "Do you really need to get that mad?" I asked. "Shut up. What's this? A nurse talking back to a doctor?" he snapped. I was shocked to hear him bring up our professions in a household argument. He never liked discussing work at home, and now he was using his status as a doctor against me. I wanted to argue back, but Ken's sudden coldness was baffling. I thought it was just a bad day and decided not to retaliate further. But Ken's foul mood wasn't just for a day. He complained about the cleanliness of rooms and bathrooms, called the food I made disgusting, and criticized the laundry for being wrinkled. When I suggested he could do it himself if he was so dissatisfied, he belittled me for being a nurse. The more I argued, the more it seemed to hurt my dignity, so I stopped responding. Ken's behavior continued with constant complaints whenever he saw me. It hadn't even been a year since our marriage. What had changed? I couldn't think of anything I'd done to upset him. Then it hit me. What if my suspicion was true? The thought sent chills down my spine. I couldn't just ignore Ken's behavior. I decided to start a specific action the next day. It was around this time that Julie called to say she was pregnant. Congratulations. That's great news. Yeah, I'll let everyone know when the baby is born. I was more excited by the happy news from Julie. Despite being pregnant, Julie kept coming to our clinic, saying she still felt unwell instead of going to an obstetrician. Strangely, around this time, Ken's consultation times with other patients became excessively long, especially the consultation times for elderly patients, causing the reception area to be overcrowded with waiting patients. Patients complained about the excessively long wait times, and once my father-in-law, who was the chairman, had to reprimand Ken about it. Ken insisted he was just providing appropriate mental care and coldly said that if anyone had complaints, they could go to another hospital. I thought he was being too harsh, but given his recent behavior, I felt confronting him about his work might only aggravate him further. So I decided to leave the matter of his consultation times to his father. About 8 months since our marital harmony began to falter, I received news from Julie that she had given birth. For some reason, Ken seemed genuinely happy about Julie's baby. I wanted to make a sarcastic comment about how he never smiles around me, but seems happy about someone else's child. Isn't that great? I can't wait to meet the baby, Ken said, unusually excited. I suggested, once things settle down, let's visit. We can invite my parents and your parents too. Let's all celebrate together. That's a great idea. Oh, I can't wait to meet the baby, Ken said, showing more emotion than usual. I watched him with a cold feeling. A month later, after Julie had completed the baby's checkup, we all gathered at Julie's house on a Sunday. Attendees included my parents, Julie's parents, her husband Joseph's parents, and Ken's parents. Though I felt bad for imposing with such a large group, Julie happily welcomed everyone into her home. Sorry, Joseph, for bringing everyone over like this. No, thank you for coming. After exchanging meaningful greetings with Joseph, we all gathered around the baby and prepared to eat. Throughout the meal prep, Ken kept looking at the baby. Once everyone started eating, he was the only one constantly distracted by her. The baby girl was tiny, with chubby cheeks, undeniably adorable. Everyone looked at her with melting smiles, but Ken seemed exceptionally drawn to her. Wow, she's so light and soft, he exclaimed, picking up the baby without asking Julie or Joseph. I was nervous that Ken might drop her since she was still so small. Joseph seemed concerned too, watching Ken closely. Julie, on the other hand, didn't seem to mind and let Ken hold the baby. She looks just like her mom. So cute, Ken cooed over the baby, showing exaggerated affection. Ah, so tiny and squishy, like an angel, he said, poking her cheeks and nuzzling her. His affectionate gestures were so parental that everyone was taken aback, but I was intently observing Ken amidst this charming scene. I knew exactly why he was so interested in someone else's child. Really, she looks just like you, doesn't she? How does it feel to be a dad? My comment made my father-in-law widen his eyes. Hey, what are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? That's the problem with incompetent nurses. Ken insulted me as usual without any sign of panic. His tone was a stark contrast to the affection he had shown the baby and everyone except Julie, and me seemed shocked by his demeaning words. I was done being swayed by Ken's arguments. It was time to settle the score for all the times he had belittled me. Excuse me, but calling someone a failure is quite an offense. The real failure of a doctor here is you, I retorted strongly, and Ken's eyes widened in surprise. The relatives froze as an unexpected marital argument unfolded. Only Joseph and I, who had discussed this matter beforehand, watched Ken with a firm stance. What? Seriously, what's your problem? You're the one who started this, Ken retorted defensively, his agitation apparent. Seeing his reaction, I was sure of my suspicions. No, you're the one who was dishonest first. That baby, it's not really Joseph's, is it? It's your child, right? Joseph is infertile, you know. He was shocked to learn of the pregnancy because it was at a time when he had no inkling of it. Infertility? What are you talking about? Ken blurted out in confusion. Obviously, he had assumed Julie's baby was Joseph's, so this revelation must have disrupted his plans. That's right. I've been living with guilt, thinking wrong of Julie when she told me she was pregnant. I couldn't be happy. In fact, I've always doubted whether the baby was really mine. Joseph voiced his suspicions about Julie. Julie gasped, shocked that Joseph had doubted her. I always thought Julie's behavior was strange. She kept coming to our hospital for a cold, but never seemed that ill. Her consultation times were abnormally long, and I wondered what kind of examinations they were doing. So, Julie and Ken, what exactly were you doing in the examination room? I asked with a piercing gaze. Julie's eyes darted around nervously as she stammered. Oh, well, what do you mean? Just regular internal medicine consultation or nose and ear checks. Julie asked in detail about how to cure her cold. That's why it took longer. Ken defensively raised his voice. However, I keenly noted how Ken casually addressed Julie by her first name. Julie. Ken then clamped his mouth shut, his expression one of belated realization, as if thinking, I've made a mistake. But it was too late. Everyone in the room had clearly heard him call a patient, also his wife's cousin, by her first name. Well, it seems you have no intention of admitting it. In that case, I have no choice but to show this, I said, exasperated by their stubbornness, and pulled out a large envelope from my bag. What's that? Ken asked, eyeing my actions closely. Without answering him, I pulled out a thick stack of documents from the envelope. Since you refuse to admit your guilt, I have to reveal this in front of everyone. This is evidence of your affair with Julie. I had it investigated by a detective. You know, your attitude towards me changed ever since Julie started coming to the hospital. You complained about the housework, belittling me for being a nurse. That's not how one treats a loving wife. I've always suspected something was going on. When I had it investigated, the results came back quickly. With all this evidence, you can't escape the truth now. I confronted Ken, thrusting the detective's evidence of his affair right in front of him. The evidence showed Ken walking arm in arm with Julie in private, and their message exchanges where Julie talked about cheating. It was more than enough to prove their affair. Unaware that I had hired a detective for an infidelity investigation, Ken was shocked by the evidence. Julie, too, turned pale and threw the documents in disbelief, saying, What's that? The relatives had complex expressions, looking at the two, especially my in-laws, who were furious, clenching their fists. What on earth are you doing, Ken? How could you do this, and with Sarah's cousin of all people? It's disgraceful, abusing your position to sneak around with a patient. Don't you have any shame as a doctor? It seemed the most unforgivable thing for my father-in-law was not just Ken's affair, but that he had engaged in such a relationship with a patient in the sacred workplace of a hospital. Ken, confronted with his parents' visible anger, was at a loss for words. Just when I thought Ken might even prostrate himself right there, the words he uttered after a moment were unbelievably shocking. "What are you talking about? Are you saying this is my fault? Look, I had no choice but to go along with Julie because she came on to me. She used the fact that I couldn't dismiss a patient request, so it's not my fault. Blame Julie." Watching Ken prioritize his self-preservation over apologizing to me or Joseph sent shivers down my spine. His attempt to pin everything on Julie was just another sign of his terrible character. Betrayed, Julie was stunned. When I heard Ken's line, I opened my mouth in surprise. What are you saying?" "I thought you were nice at Sarah's wedding. I deliberately went to your hospital just to see you. But who was it that quickly turned their feelings toward me? You preferred a younger, prettier woman like me over plain Sarah, didn't you? You even said your marriage to Sarah was forced by your father, and you wished you had married someone beautiful like me. I fell for you because no one else said such things to me. Joseph was always busy with work and didn't pay much attention to me, so why betray me now?" Julie screamed, revealing her true feelings. "Shut up. You were just too pushy. It was just a momentary lapse in judgment," Ken retorted. But it was obvious he had feelings for Julie, especially from the way he had adoringly looked at their child earlier. Unable to watch this chaos any longer, I exchanged glances with Joseph and my in-laws. "Julie, how much do you think I cared about you and worked? I admit it was wrong of me not to pay more attention to you. I am sorry, but meeting another man behind my back isn't that unfair. If you were unhappy, you should have told me directly. I was handling a big case, and once it was successful, I planned to take you on a trip. But you trampled on all my efforts without even admitting your wrongdoing," Joseph said calmly but firmly. His arguments were so irrefutably logical that Julie was left speechless, uttering only a stifled, "You dare to talk back to me?" Julie trembled, her gaze darting around, clearly aware that she had committed adultery. "Enough. I'm tired of your excuses, Ken. You're fired from the hospital. I'm rescinding the offer for you to take over. Harry will succeed me," my father-in-law declared, glaring at Ken. Ken, who never expected his affair to cost him his job and future as the clinic's director, was stunned and speechless. "What do you mean?" Ken stammered, shaking. "I know everything. You were overcharging elderly patients for unnecessary consultations and even swindling money during examinations. I found out everything yesterday," my father-in-law revealed, shocking everyone present. It made sense now. Ken's unusually long consultations with elderly patients were due to this deceitful scheme. "Why did you?" Ken didn't deny his guilt, but he seemed consumed with anger over losing his successor position. "The nurses noticed it, the same nurses you looked down upon. They watched the doctors closely. Thanks to them, I was able to notice a serious issue that I had missed because I was too busy," my father-in-law said, smiling kindly at me. "I see. He was protecting me. He was angry seeing me ridiculed by Ken. Realizing this, I felt tears welling up. So, that's it. We're cutting ties with you. Don't ever cross our threshold again. If you cause any trouble for Sarah or Harry, I won't forgive you. Now get out," my father-in-law bellowed, his roar echoing like a warlord from a historical TV program, causing all of us to tremble. Ken was clearly the most shocked person. He screamed and fled from the scene. Left behind, Julie looked uncomfortable, but her parents began scolding her, which was a relief for both Joseph and me. "I'm so sorry." Julie apologized to me and Joseph, but our resentment had already faded into cold indifference. That day ended with Julie getting a scolding from her parents, and we all dispersed in a heavy atmosphere. Since then, Joseph and I have separated from our respective partners, and Ken and Julie remarried. Ken lost his position as the successor, and Julie faced a life of poverty. Ken tried to find work at other hospitals, but his misdeeds at our clinic were well known, and he couldn't find another job. Too proud to take a non-doctor job, Ken struggled to start his job hunt. Julie, busy with childcare, couldn't work, and their constant fights over the lack of income were heard of. They might end up divorcing, I thought. Later, I learned Ken had married me reluctantly at his father's insistence. His sudden coldness was an attempt to make me initiate the breakup. Knowing Ken's current hellish situation, I couldn't help but feel it served him right. Joseph and I received property division, leaving the couple mired in debt. I wonder how they plan to live from now on. Julie must have dreamed of a wealthy life by marrying Ken, the expected clinic director, but now her dreams are dashed. I can only imagine her despair, but I don't sympathize. If she had stayed with Joseph, she would have had a much happier life. Choosing Ken was her decision, and she should suffer the consequences. Meanwhile, I continue to work as a nurse at my former father-in-law's clinic. The clinic directorship has passed to Ken's brother, Harry, bringing back a vibrant atmosphere. Despite losing trust due to Ken's crimes, we refunded the overcharged fees and regained our patients' trust through my father-in-law and Harry's careful management. Firing Ken turned out to be a good decision. On a personal note, I've grown close to Joseph. As two people who suffered similar fates, we found a lot in common. Joseph continued his work as a successful lawyer, never short of clients. Seeing him dedicated to his work inspires me to do my best too. Perhaps there's a future for Joseph and me, a bond formed through shared adversity. Life is unpredictable. Work, love. I plan to enjoy and give my best to what's in front of me.